Breakfast Club host Charlamagne the God and liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov took on conservative journalist Piers and perpetual idiot Dave Rubin in a masterclass performance, making the case that Donald Trump's presidential record is terrible and that he is unfit for office. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, I'm hyped for this. As you know, we're big fans of Jessica Tarlov here at Pondering Politics, and she and Charlamagne the God just knocked this one out of the park. You should definitely check out the full interview, which is about 30 minutes long. I pulled a bunch of assorted clips here. Otherwise, we'd probably watch the whole thing and it'd take 2 hours. But in this very first clip, Jessica Tarlov makes the case that the media landscape is hostile to Biden despite his objectively good record.
But there is a problem going on right now with media coverage of the Biden presidency, and there are problems with the Biden campaign.
What are the problems?
So I'll start with media coverage. Everybody knows now that you want to print stories that get clicks, and negative stories are the ones that do it. Even people who are huge supporters of the president focus on all the polls that are negative. Most people wouldn't know that if you went to the Real Clear Politics homepage and clicked on polls, the average has Joe Biden down just 1 percentage point to Trump. You would think that he was getting trounced. You'd look at swing state polls and you'd see that in a lot of the swing states, like Pennsylvania, for instance, which is going to be a huge deal, he's up massively. We only talked about the fact that he was down in one Michigan poll last week. In terms of the economic news, the Wall Street Journal, our very own Wall Street Journal here at News Corp, had a hugely optimistic set of editorials out there. 62% of Americans think the next year, so 2024 election year, is going to be better for them. When are they going to go and vote? In November. That's a lot of time for this economic recovery to really settle in for people. But no one wants to talk about that. It's not popular. It's not good clickbait.
She's 100% correct. And we've talked about this repeatedly on this channel. The media landscape, for all of, how much the right wing talks about the lamestream media and how the liberal media is in bed for Democrats, the fact of the matter is that they are much more likely to throw Democrats and President Biden under the bus than Fox News and OAN and Newsmax and Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire and Steven Crowder and Dave Rubin are willing to throw Republicans under the bus, because the right-wing media in both mainstream and alternate media are ideologically driven, right? Whereas mainstream media, as Jon Stewart said famously like 10 or 15 years ago, is driven by sensationalism and laziness, right? So even though those reporters may personally vote Democrat much more often than Republican, they'll gladly throw Biden under the bus to focus on the negativity. She's 100% correct. In this next clip that we're about to play, this one's relatively short, but it's funny because Jessica Tarlov, who fears no one because she takes on 4 other far right-wing losers every day or very often during the week on the 5 on the Fox Propaganda Network, she tells Dave Rubin to his face exactly what Trump is.
And I would say respectfully, in terms of the polls and everything, people don't vote on what really matters. We vote on what we can feel, right? And I think because of that, people are going, Donald Trump, he seems back. There's energy there, and there's just no energy with Biden.
Trump,
and nobody likes Kamala. That's
but Trump has lost every election except 2016.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a loser.
And
I love it. That's absolutely correct. Donald Trump is really good at projecting to his cult that he is a winner, when objectively speaking, he's a loser. They lost the White House on his watch, the House on his watch, the Senate on his watch. They underperformed in the 2022 midterms. The off-year elections were a bloodbath. That's not to say that couldn't change in 2024, but this guy is not a winner. Joe Biden and the Democrats have a much better record, at least since Donald Trump came into office. Now, in this next clip, we're going to talk about the double standard. Jessica Tarlov points out the double standard in civility politics because Piers and Dave Rubin complain about how the left and Democrats demonize the right and Republicans, and Jessica Tarlov corrects them on the facts.
But as someone who spends my time in conservative media with people who vehemently disagree with me, I've had it up to here. If I could clutch my pearls any harder, whatever it is, they try to say that liberals talk the same way about conservatives that conservatives talk about liberals. If Donald Trump wins the presidency again, you will have a president who calls more than half the country, 81 million voted for Joe Biden, 74 million for Trump, calls us thugs, pedophiles, communists, Marxists, anti-Americans, traitors. I'm not being welcomed into any sort of
I have a question.
And they don't address it at all. He just changes the topic. But again, she's absolutely the case. You know, the Fox Propaganda Network and so many other places, they'll clutch their pearls. Oh my God. Joe Biden in one speech referred to elements of the Republican Party as semi-fascist. And again, he gave a gazillion disclaimers before that label and after. Not all Republicans, not even a majority of Republicans. Most Republicans are decent people and I work with them. Donald Trump and Republicans never give that damn caveat when they're referring to the left and Democrats. They just say the radical left communists, the Marxists, the thugs, the groomers. And it's not just Trump. It'd be bad enough if it was Trump alone because he's the leader of the party. It's also Marjorie Taylor Greene and others. But again, the double standard. She is absolutely correct to point it out. And this is something that I talk a lot about in my content, even on Twitter. I recently had an exchange with people. I don't believe that the left and Democrats are morally obligated to a higher ethical standard than the right and Republicans. If Republicans can dish it out, they should be able to take it. And if they can't take it, they shouldn't dish it out. That's the correct answer to this. And this next clip, the panel takes on the notion of Donald Trump's, absolute immunity. He thinks he should be given a blank check. And even Piers Morgan is disgusted by this.
But when he says this, I don't laugh, right? He said the President of the United States on Truth Social yesterday, the President of the United States must have full immunity, without which it would be impossible for him to properly function. Any mistake, even if well-intended, would be met with almost certain indictment by the opposing party at term end. For even events that cross the line must fall under total immunity. So I tweeted, so if President Biden orders the immediate assassination of you, Donald Trump, that's okay, is it? That's covered.
What you're explaining is the true magic of Donald Trump, whether you love his policies or not. Because on one hand, you're going, well, there are certain lines when he pokes fun at the...
Yeah, but he means this.
No. So your line now is he put it in quotes, crosses the line.
No, I can tell when he's laughing and joking.
So you think when he says cross the line, what he meant was I can take out Joe Biden.
No, that was me suggesting that that's where you take the argument.
But what do you think he means?
I think what he means
would kill one of his political opponents or get them killed if he could.
No, I think he's actually, as always with Trump, it's self-interest. He wants to basically make sure he can't be prosecuted.
He means Jack Smith, go home.
Yeah.
That's what he means.
Yeah,
and if the corollary is my political opponent could kill someone, he then wants to talk about 2016 when we all ran around and said, he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, and his supporters wouldn't care.
By this new criteria, he could do that and get away with it.
Right. Well, I think there are some legal questions as per what a president is allowed to get away with and not be prosecuted after. But I'm pretty sure murder is not one of them, like outright murder.
We don't know that.
He would like it to be. He would like anything that crosses the line to fall under total immunity.
The man has open adulation for Xi Jinping, for Kim Jong-un.
That's right.
He's a wannabe dictator. And I've been at Fox News my entire media career. I do not fancy myself an MSNBC type person who wants to lose their mind about those things. But that is very serious to have someone who was the leader of the free world and is running to be it again, to believe that these people who are anathema to democracy are doing it right.
What did you feel?
100%. And again, that's where I'll give even Piers Morgan some credit. Even though he clearly has a bias towards Trump, if Biden had said and done, or if a Democrat or a leftist or a progressive had said and done half the things that Donald Trump had said and done, Piers Morgan would be infinitely more furious, right? So he's one of those enlightened centrists where Trump's bad, but I've got to pretend that the left is comparably bad when they're clearly not. But Dave Rubin's stupid defense in this, the fact of the matter is that Trump's attorneys attempted to make this case in a D.C. appellate court, and they were asked by the judge this exact same question. So by your logic, a sitting president could call up SEAL Team 6 and sick them on a political rival and assassinate them. And you think that the president should be beyond criminal prosecution. And Trump's attorneys, they were certainly uncomfortable. They clearly didn't want to answer the question, but they did answer the question that you would first have to try to impeach and convict first. Otherwise, the absolute criminal immunity would apply. So when Dave Rubin's like, well, murder, surely not. No, Trump's attorney is saying even murder, you can't criminally prosecute unless you get impeached and convicted first, which, again, as we've talked about, presents its own challenges. Now, in this next clip, they talk about January 6th. And here again, even the Trump sympathetic Piers Morgan is disgusted, right? So it's Dave Rubin is basically an island unto himself, and Charlamagne the God gets in on the action as well. Dave Rubin has an unenviable position, and he's also an idiot.
And Kamala,
and also, too, though,
yeah.
we're acting like, you know, it's not just rhetoric. Yes, he said he wanted to be a dictator for a day. Yes, he said, you know, he should be immune from killing his political rivals. But he also attempted a coup with his country, guys.
Right.
Like, why are we acting like that did not happen? Why do we keep acting like January 6th did not happen?
I mean, it didn't happen. I mean, what, that a bunch of people showed up with no plans, no weapons? I mean, I'm not defending the people that actually broke windows or anything else, but there was no coup. There was no
That was an attempted coup in this country. I got eyes and ears. I'm not a political expert,
was there
but I know what I saw.
Was there a plan? Did anyone have a piece of paper that said
Proud Boys had a plan, and they were invited into the White House.
Right.
There were people with zip ties. That's not a casual thing that you walk around with.
I'm not diminishing.
They went after the ballot box. They were talking about hanging the vice president.
There were 1,000. There were only 100 bad ones, let's say. That doesn't mean that it wasn't an attempted coup fomented by the President of the United States of America.
I mean, does anyone honestly think that Donald Trump thought that the next day he would be president, you know, post-transition,
Bill Barr does, which is why he finally had to go. There are people, I mean, what was so powerful about the January 6th committee and what they were able to put together is the fact that they used almost exclusively Republican testimony. People who had worked for him. I mean, look at the text messages from his own son to Mark Meadows, or what Ivanka had to be honest about when she testified, or Jared Kushner, or Cassidy Hutchinson, who they're going after now. I mean, he made a mockery of our system. And frankly, I mean, it speaks to the strength of our institutions and the backbone of Mike Pence for that 8 hours that he was able to say.
I thought it was I got to say, it was a pretty terrifying spectacle.
I'm sure watching it abroad.
Again, even Piers Morgan thinks that Dave Rubin's position here is absurd, and it is. Again, I always imagine, again, the litmus test should be when a conservative tries to downplay something that Trump has said, done, or attempted, the immediate response should be, okay, what if Obama had done it? What if Biden tries to do it? What if Kamala Harris tries to do it? What if Secretary Clinton tries to do it? And then pin them on an answer, because the truth is, if Barack Obama or if Joe Biden attempts in the future something like January 6th, which of course he wouldn't do, Dave Rubin would be flipping tables and demanding secession, right? But again, he grades Trump on a curve. So in this next clip, Jessica Tarlov addresses another point, because Piers Morgan and Dave Rubin think, and even Charlamagne the God to an extent, think that that President Biden is in a degree of decline. But she points out the fact that, well, by that logic, isn't Donald Trump?
Can I say two things? One, Charlamagne brought up a point that I wanted to add on to that's really important about the vim and vigor, right? So Donald Trump, I don't think that he's going to trip and fall and die tomorrow. But when people do see him, he's talking absolute rubbish.
He's done that for 50 years. I mean, come on.
But people, I agree. And I didn't even like his shows when it was on regular TV. But my point
even
is,
when I appeared? Come on, the 2008 Celebrity Apprentice was the stuff of masterpiece. But the kind of communication that he's putting out there, even in the last 48 hours, we went from Iowa. I was there, I was on air, and I said this is a big accomplishment for him. He's being conciliatory. How long will it last? Then we got to immigrants are poisoning the blood of America. Then defaming a woman who he's been charged. They found him guilty of sexually assaulting her. He continues with that. He's talking about how magnets work in water, you know, using ID to buy a loaf of bread. It's not like people who are at home are saying, this guy's got it together and this guy doesn't. No, but you know what it is?
And again, they have no answer for that. Piers Morgan changes the subject again. He will complain all day about, President Biden's seeming senility and lack of vigor. And listen, again, as we've talked about on this channel, there is a colossal difference between Joe Biden in 2012 and Joe Biden in 2023. But he's 81 years old. He's old. There are cobwebs there. Do I think it's senility? No, I have no evidence of that. I'm saying he's old, right? Based on testimony and based on things that we've heard from Democrats and Republicans alike, including Kevin McCarthy, by the way, before he got really angry at Joe Biden after he was kicked out of the speakership. They've all reported that Joe Biden is substantive in dialogue, that he has a command of the facts. He understands foreign and domestic policy. He is conversant on the topic. No one's ever said that about Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, the people who used to work for Donald Trump say he's an idiot. He's uncurious and he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But Piers Morgan's not ready to talk about Donald Trump's gaffes and his verbal mistakes and his magnets, understand, car, TV, elephant. Nobody talks about that. And she's correct to point out again the double standard. In this clip, Dave Rubin tries to make the case of, well, I mean, rhetoric and before COVID, Donald Trump had a pretty good record. Look what he accomplished.
That if you look at the actual reality of Trump's presidency pre-COVID, the economy was booming.
Yeah.
We had the Abraham Accords, lowest all-time black unemployment, lowest all-time Latino unemployment. And you may remember at the State of the Union when he mentioned that, and AOC and the rest of the Congressional Black Caucus sat there like this. I thought they would have been for low black unemployment.
So again, he's bragging about Trump's accomplishments. And again, I don't know why we should, because he says at one point, pre-COVID, well, I don't know why we wouldn't count COVID. You certainly would not count COVID if it happened under a Democrat. So why should we again grade Republicans on a curve? Not going to do that. But Jessica Tarlov just utterly spanks him here.
Good. But to your point about what this world looked like or this country before COVID, Trump's setting all these records. Guess what? Biden's done better than his records. So black unemployment is lower than it was under Trump. Latino unemployment lower than under Trump. Let's talk about oil. I can't even tell you how many times I've been told, drill, baby, drill. Well, Joe Biden's doing it. 13.3 million barrels. It's the highest amount of oil produced by any country in history.
Good sales pitch, but here's the critical question.
And so then again, he changes the subject to who do you think will win in the end? That's the thing. Again, Trump sympathizers, Dave Rubin, obviously more so and certainly much more stupid than Piers Morgan. But the fact of the matter is they're both Trump sympathizers and they like to pretend that there's some artificial balance. Joe Biden is simply objectively better than Donald Trump. As a person, as a president, the records that Trump touts, Joe Biden exceeds him. It's simply the case. And this was a masterclass performance by Jessica Tarlov and Charlamagne the God, who, by the way, isn't the biggest fan of Joe Biden, right? He's gotten in the news about it too. But even he recognizes the difference, as much as he might be underwhelmed by President Biden, and certainly as a fighter, right? He doesn't think Biden is enough of a fighter, which I think is a fair argument to make. Even he recognizes that Donald Trump is simply objectively worse and a threat to democracy. Masterclass performance. You should definitely check out this interview in its entirety and let me know what you think in the comments.